Today's video is going to be essentially another palette revival. So I've been doing these for about 2 years. Basically, I take a very popular palette that has launched quite a while ago, many years ago, and I basically recreate it as if this palette was to launch now in the current year. So today I'm going to be doing this with the Modern Renaissance palette from ABH. This was such a legendary palette. I feel like when it launched, I remember my mind just being so blown. I was so excited to get it. It was probably one of the very first times I ever set an alarm for a launch. I wanted to make sure I got my hands on it, and I did hit pan in a bunch of the shades. It was one of those palettes back then, before I had a lot of palettes, where I got so much use out of it. I just remember thinking the quality was so good. I do not unfortunately have that palette anymore. I did declutter it, so there's going to be pictures in this vicinity up there for reference. I did already basically choose the color story, but I do have some options for some shimmer shadows that I'm not sure about, so we're going to go through that, and I'm actually going to add back 2 shadows. So the original has 14 shades. I did condense it down. I decided to curate it down, so I removed 4 shades. They weren't really the shades that were keeping the color story together. They weren't the essence of the color story, if that makes sense. So let's get into swatching this. Unfortunately, I don't have it to swatch it against it, but I feel like based off of just a bunch of swatch pictures and pictures of the palette, I feel like I got pretty close with some of the shades. And then of course, updating the shimmers. I believe the original only had like 2 shimmers, and maybe there was 1 satin, or one of the 2 was satin. I don't even remember, honestly. So definitely amping up those shimmers. So let's get swatching. The first matte shade I chose is Orchid, and this is from Glaminatrix Cosmetics. And I felt like this was a really nice mauve toned shade. This is basically in place of Buon Fresco. If anything, it's maybe a little, just a tad bit more mid-tone, while the shade in the Modern Renaissance palette is a little bit lighter. So I did want to add back some of that depth. The next shade is a rosy pink, and this one is the signature Love Letter shade, and also Venetian Red. I feel like those two are a little bit similar. I think this one's actually more closer into Love Letter, and I do feel like this is one of the kind of signature shades in this color story. That is what makes it this color story. So I definitely wanted a shade like that. This is from Terra Moons. I don't remember if I said. And I think it also goes really nicely with this one. It is Manic, and this is for Cypress Umber. Definitely a great shade in here. This one is pretty much more or less a neutral dark brown. Of course, needed a deepening up shade. I feel like this is probably pretty close. If anything, Cypress Umber might be just slightly more neutral. Next shade is Darena, and this is in place of Golden Ochre. Another shade in here that I felt like is very much a signature shade. Does not swatch the best, but I felt like tonal wise, it's a really washed out mustard yellow, and has just a tad bit of brightness while retaining its grunginess. It is Lucretia, and this is, instead of Red Ochre, another shade I feel like is signature in here. And this is just a really beautiful, it's not a burgundy, it's like a really warm reddish brown. It's basically a terracotta, and I think it goes really nicely in here. And then the last shade is this Rusty Red, which is instead of Real Gar. And this one I do feel like is a little bit less orange, but I do like this one in here. And this one is from Bella Beaute Bar, and it's from the Melted Mattes palette. So there's no name on it. So this is the color story in terms of the mattes. And next I'm going to be swatching the shimmers, and we're going to be deciding which shimmers we want to keep. And this is going to be totally different from the palette, because there is, like I said, one kind of true shimmer, which is Primavera. And then I think Vermeer was a little bit of a shimmer. And then there were definitely some kind of satin shades in there. So there's really only 2 kind of shimmers in here. So the first shimmer is Reserve number 2, and this is from ShineBySD. And I feel like this is a really nice beigey cream shimmer shadow to kind of nod to Primavera and Vermeer. But it's definitely much more sparklier, and it's very sheer, but a little bit buildable, and it's got like a warmer tone to it, and it does have slightly like a pale gold reflect to it. The next shade is Angel from Glaminatrix Cosmetics, and I knew I wanted this kind of neutral. This is not a multi-chrome, it's not shifty. It is just a beautiful mauve toned base shimmer with slightly more silvery reflect to it, so it makes it very dimensional, and I feel like it fits really nicely, especially with these kinds of tones here. Next shade is Infatuation, also from Glaminatrix Cosmetics, and I knew I wanted more of a neutral brown. ever so slightly a cooler tone to it, so I thought it would go really nicely with the brown and some of these other tones. And then this last shade is Clinohumite, and this is from Dualism Beauty, and this one has a bright orange reflect, which I really wanted in here. I felt like the palette was missing a more orangey kind of shimmer, and this one has just a tad bit of a kind of grayish base, and it shifts to gold to green. So I feel like it really goes well with more of the orange, but could be paired with a lot of the other shades because of its warmth. It's definitely got a little bit of peach in there too, which really makes it work with the cusp of the pinks as well. So not just the orange and the terracotta. And then I have 3 shimmers that I was on the fence about. I'm not even sure which ones I would necessarily switch out. Potentially this orange one, because it is definitely a little bit unconventional in here. So one of the shades I had in mind was Nocturne Ash, but I feel like this one's maybe a little bit more of a true purple, and I don't feel like it actually fits in here as much, but I kind of thought it was interesting because it is a multi-chrome, but I don't think I would want to switch out any of these shades for this one. Like, I just feel like it's not worth it. And then the next 2 shades I have are both from ShineBySD. I have Luminosity, which is this purpley one, and then Moonbeam, which is more of a neutral and has a bunch of green sparkles in it. And I actually feel like that one doesn't really fit in here, so I don't think I would want to switch this one out either, but I just knew I wanted a sheer topper, which is why I went with Reserve number 2. And then this one I feel like would actually be really, really nice in here. But again, I'm not sure if I want to switch any of these out because it is a little bit more purple than this mauve shade from Glaminatrix. But I don't know if it would add enough. Like, I feel like this one just makes this color story a little bit more interesting. So I'm actually not going to switch it out, I think. I feel like it was helpful for me to just kind of talk myself through it now that I've seen them kind of swatched out. I do feel like it would be really nice in here, but I'm kind of sticking with it because I don't want this to be 2 kind of monochromatic shimmers, and I feel like if I switch these out, it would be a little bit too monochromatic. So here's the final color story of the condensed version, but now I'm going to add in 2 more shades, and these 2 shades I feel like will really just spin this palette and make it even more interesting color story wise. And I think those 2 shades I would make mattes. Maybe 1 shimmer, I'm on the fence. Definitely think there's a couple of ways I could spin this. So I definitely feel like this color story would look beautiful with a deep plum. So I have 2 options here. And then the other shade I would add is something a little bit more peachy. So it's still kind of in the realm of some of these tones down here, and I think it would really complement them. And right now all the mattes are pretty mid-tone, so it does add just a little bit more depth to the lighter side. So I'm gonna swatch both of these and then this one, and we'll decide if I want to only add mattes, because I'm definitely kind of leaning towards only adding mattes. So I'm going to first swatch the shade, which is Astrea from Devinah. And I feel like this one also would go really nicely with this shimmer. You could also use it with this shimmer, go really well with this one. And then you could deepen up with this, and then this one as well. So I feel like it's a good addition in here. And then for plum, I have either Virago from Devinah Cosmetics, which I think looks great, or I have this deep plum from the Best Mattes palette from Bella Beaute Bar. And I feel like both of these kind of spin it a little bit differently. So I actually feel like I really like both of these in this color story, especially this one with these. But I feel like if I'm adding a lighter shade, I don't want to add another mid-tone matte. So I would add the super deep plum, because I definitely think this color story at this point, if I'm expanding it, needs to have a darker matte. I try my best to just wipe that other shade away and add this one in so I wouldn't have to re-swatch everything. Let me know what you think. I feel like it's a really fun color story where you can definitely do some super easy neutral looks, but you can also add in just a little bit more color with the pink or the plum so that it doesn't feel as neutral. This is my version 2. So it's definitely pushing it outside of the original color story of Modern Renaissance, but I do really like it and I would definitely reach for it. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this color story. Would you have switched out any shades that I didn't? If you enjoy this kind of content, I will put up my other videos like this on the screen so you can keep watching. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.